Good evening, and welcome to our November Parent Academy. I'm Martha Henson. I am the Health and Wellness Specialist. Here, let me see if I can do it. Hi, we'll try this again. Welcome to our November Parent Academy. Tonight's presentation will be recorded, so you will be able to watch that. After tonight's presentation, you can just click on this link, and we will also be sharing that through a 20 alert email after this event. We thank you for being here. We will have a Q&A session as soon as our presenter is done tonight, so feel free to put questions in the chat, and we will be fielding those to Tom, our presenter, for him to answer. So as we go through this presentation, feel free to put those questions in the chat. We're so glad you're here. It is my honor to introduce our speaker tonight. We had the privilege of hearing Tom Caughlan from Children's Hospital last spring speak about teens and social media, and we just knew we had to have him for one of our parent academies. Tom is with Children's Hospital here in Colorado Springs. He is a licensed clinical social worker and is currently the manager of behavioral health and clinical social work at Children's Hospital. He has been working in child and adolescent mental health field since 2003, including patient, inpatient, outpatient, school-based, and crisis settings. He received his bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Michigan and his master's degree in clinical social work from Augsburg College. His specific interests include childhood resiliency and integrating behavioral health into school and medical settings. It is with great pleasure that we introduce Tom tonight, and we'll let him get started with, no further ado. Go for it.
Thank you,
Tom.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank District 20 for inviting me to give this presentation, and we're going to make sure, I'm going to clarify real quick that we have all the technology up and working okay, and that we're able to go through slides. Excellent. Okay. Well, this is a presentation you've joined on teens and social media, and I'll preface this by saying that we are in, to use an overtaxed term, an unprecedented time with COVID and the increase we're seeing in social media use. So a lot of the data that I'm going to be presenting today is not updated. It's not accurate for COVID in 2020 terms, but we can all assume as parents that we are going to be seeing a stark increase. So if we look at the data that has been out there in existence, it does say that 45% of teenagers say that they are online almost constantly. And I think as we've seen more and more kids go to remote learning, they are constantly on a device. Schools give out those devices in order to enable learning, and children and teens have a near constant access to all of the apps, all of the social media apps, but then all of the chat applications that are built into their learning environments as well. And so this is really an inescapable environment where they have constant access to social media, but also some of the pitfalls that come with being wired in constantly. When we look at the most popular social media apps that are used by teens, sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty here. Okay, there we go. Okay.
There.
So here we go. If you're looking at the most popular social media apps used by teens back in 2008, these haven't changed a whole lot, but we do have apps like TikTok that have came into the realm. And we notice a trend when you look at the most popular apps. A lot of them are very image-based, and they're things that children are watching. And we've seen Instagram increase in popularity, and we've seen apps like TikTok move up this chart in popularity. And I think we're seeing a big rise in younger kids, especially those that are in the age group of kind of 8 to 11, that latency age group, use these applications more and more to communicate. This is pre-COVID now. The average time per day online that teens were reporting and parents were reporting an average of 9 hours per day. That was outside of what they were doing with schooling. So if you think about a child now doing their entire school day remotely, and accessing all of these apps online, and then children 8 to 12 spending 6 hours per day, add another 8 hours onto that, because that's what they're really having access to. And with parents also working remotely from home, it can be very difficult to have the time and ability to be aware of and censor and monitor how much time your child is on their applications. And I know from watching my children, they can be sneaky at times and go between what they're doing on their iPads for school versus what they're doing on their iPads for fun. And that can be a full-time job. So I think as we're seeing more and more remote work, remote schooling, this becomes a concern. This is a slide that I have really enjoyed. This is something that was posted in National Geographic a few years ago, but really talked about what human evolution is going to look like in 100,000 years, because our habits shape our evolution and our phenotypes, our genetic phenotypes. And so if we look at the amount of time that we spend facing screens, the amount of time that we spend interacting via screens, we notice these gigantic eyes. And they talked about in this particular article that we will move from wearable technology to implanted technology so that we are online 24/7 at the time. And that is frightening. But this would be some of the effects that over time our bodies would evolve to do this even better, and I think that's a concern. The ambitions of social media are high, and I think this is what social media aspires to do, is community building and helping teens and children find like-minded peers generated around interests. This helps to do that identity formation that we hope all kids are moving towards as they get older and older in development and move towards adulthood. And it also helps with maintaining relationships. Now, this is the part that's trickier. Social media aims at building empathy, awareness, and understanding of others. But if we're only projecting our best selves, how do we really see empathy and understanding happening? And it also emotional support. And we'll talk further about how some of that can kind of backfire when teens and children do try to seek out emotional support on social media, as it can make them a target for cyberbullying. The negative effects of social media, because this is really a new technology and we don't have a lot of good longitudinal data to support it, we're just now starting to see more of these long-term effects, which are increased feelings of depression, overthinking and rumination, anxiety, a lot of anxiety and fear of missing out on events, poor body image, loneliness, poor sleep quality because of that exposure to the blue light, and the fact that it's highly addictive. And this addiction is something that is being studied increasingly as we're seeing more and more children and teens being physically unable to put down their devices or be away from their devices and their social media accounts. What's bad about social media? Well, I'm going to sound like a downer a little bit, but most teens are posting photos of themselves online or using their real names and profiles. They reveal their birth dates and interests, and they post their school name and the town where they live in. So they're giving out a lot of personal information there. And this can make them targets for online predators. And most teens have said they've been contacted online by someone they didn't know in a way that made them feel scared and uncomfortable, or they received online advertising that was inappropriate for their age. And sometimes teens will lie about their age to get access to websites. My thought is, if you give a teen or a child the access to the internet that is unbridled and unchecked, that they will find the end of the internet if you give them enough time. And of course, as parents, we want to make sure that we're not giving them that unchecked, unmonitored access. This is a video that I hope I'm going to be able to get access to that is really short, but gives a little insight into what it looks like Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think we're going to be able to play this, unfortunately. But this is a YouTube video that does show the addictive tendencies of social media. And since we can't play it, I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. And I'm also going to talk about The Social Dilemma, which is a Netflix documentary that if you have Netflix, it's free. I believe it's still on the site, free to watch. But it really talks about the addictive tendencies of social media being very similar to drug addiction, having the same dopamine and serotonin effects as gambling, as cocaine, as sex. And this causes this feedback cycle that children and teens and most adults can't get away from. Now, I will preface this by saying that The Social Dilemma is a documentary that was created and funded by the very people that created the addictive parts of social media, particularly the like button on Facebook. And they talk about how that like button has become a form of operant conditioning that is a feedback loop that gives us that dopamine hit every single time we see it. And what we see when you look at the behavior of all humans, but we're focused on teens and children, when they post something out there on the internet and they start seeing those likes accumulate, those are hits of dopamine. That's an addictive cycle that they're going to be engaged in. And we want to remind kids, because kids are intelligent and they will understand if we give them truth, that social media is elaborately tracking everything that they're doing online. And the original algorithms that were made by these coders at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, these algorithms are now run by artificial intelligence and large server banks of computers, and they want to maximize your usage by targeted advertising. And how many times have I shopped for a pair of shoes as an adult, and then on the next day my entire social media feed is filled up with advertising, and it's just frightening because you're using Google on one hand to do the searches, and then it's communicating with Instagram, which is a completely different platform owned by a completely different company. So it's disturbing. If it happens to you, it's happening to your kids. They do know that fake news spreads 6 times faster than true news, and I think we've seen that in the past year and certainly during this election cycle. And they do know that this cycle of feedback and this addictive tendency reduces interpersonal interactions as individuals are entitled to their own facts. So it makes people, first of all, want to talk about themselves more, which is a little bit frightening if you're in my field. And that really is that reduction in empathy that we're fearful of. It also just reduces people's ability to socialize effectively. So if you look at what's happened during COVID, we have a captive and isolated audience who are susceptible and vulnerable to cyberbullying, to social peer pressure. And we have more and more of them talking about themselves and more of them not interacting in an empathetic way with one another. And I think the reason that we saw more of an increased spike in mental health issues at the start of the school year is because kids were out of practice when they returned to school in person, and that was very stressful for them. One of my favorite quotes of this documentary was, "Comparison is the thief of joy," which is attributed to Teddy Roosevelt. But if you think about how social media has us comparing ourselves to other people's best selves, and we're watching people put out their vacations or their relationships, they're constantly putting out the absolute best version of themselves, and that can make us feel very susceptible, and makes us feel like we might not be living our best life. And social media companies and substance abuse treatment centers are the only businesses that call their clients users. That is frightening from a treatment perspective. So the Royal Society of Public Health in England studied that Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram all led to increased feelings of depression, anxiety, and poor body image and loneliness, reduced ability to read and interpret social cues, and reduced empathy and self-awareness. The most fascinating part of their research found that the more that children and teens use or abuse social media, they're less likely to take on risks. And these risks aren't what we're thinking about, like driving fast cars or going cliff diving. We're talking about even wanting to drive cars. We're even talking about wanting to get driver's licenses. They're more averse to simply wanting to put themselves out there as a possible risk, and making new friends and making relationships is a risk in their psychosocial realm. And so you see less kids developing what we call individuation and developmental psychology, those skills that it takes to leave the nest, to go to college. I've noticed in the span of my career that as social media has become more prevalent, kids talk more about the fear of wanting to grow up, the fear of wanting to drive, the fear of wanting to leave the house and get a job. And that's something that is very much a product of anxiety that social media creates. The questions to ask, according to Dr. Amy Sass with Children's, if your child is ready for social media, ask these 2 questions. The first one, are you comfortable exposing your child to a particular movie, song, game, or website without constantly monitoring or overseeing them? And the second question is, are you comfortable answering your child's questions about sex, violence, abuse, self-destructive behavior, or materialism that this media exposure might bring up? If you've answered no to either of these, then your child is not ready for social media. And so I think a lot of parents don't ask these questions, especially the second one, because really as parents, we need to be the individuals that are giving the healthy information when children are exposed to this information in the moment. And I see a lot of times there's a tendency to avoid that and kind of blow it off, and parents will say, that's bad, don't go to that website, but there's no follow through with that. There's no blocking of the content, and there's no explanation of why that content exists and why it's bad. In a rating of social media sources from the most positive to the most negative, YouTube was the most positive. Kids can also sometimes go on there and pursue interests. The bane of my existence is unboxing videos. I think I finally got my 8-year-old daughter out of that. But there are some positive things on YouTube where children can go on and pursue their interests. Twitter is informational. Then we get down to the more image-focused platforms like Snapchat and Instagram. Why are those images, those image-focused mediums of social media the most harmful? Because a lot of times those images can be digitally enhanced, and they can create unrealistic expectations for body image. A lot of times teens don't know that those images are retouched. And when they did a study of 144 teenage girls, they were mostly unaware that Instagram photos could be manipulated, and that the photos they were looking at were in fact manipulated. So just like you can download an app like Instagram, you can also download photo enhancing software that can, if you are the social media account person for a celebrity, you can enhance that photo and make a very unattainable version of what that body image looks like. And the higher that photo manipulation, the more manipulated the photo was, it correlated with a higher social comparison. So that's a little bit reverse psychology in what you'd think would happen. But the more fake the photo was, the more that the teenage girls related to it. And they did this using the body image state scale and the Iowa Netherlands comparison orientation measure. Another thing that happens a lot that we're seeing more and more on social media and more during COVID, as we do have this isolated captive audience, is cyberbullying. And so cyberbullying is any cruelty to others that happens by sending or posting harmful material using technology. Cyberbullying prevalence is increasing, and it's happening with younger and younger kids. Again, every single platform that is out there has the ability that has a chat function or a way that kids can communicate, and this includes gaming. A lot of times cyberbullying is starting at the age of 9 and usually ends after 14 years of age, but it peaks in middle school. We see a lot of bullying prevention programs go into place. Every school in the state is mandated to have a bullying prevention program, but we're seeing this impact younger and younger students. After 14, it becomes cyber or sexual harassment due to the nature of acts or the age of actors. And it affects 65 to 85% of the kids directly or indirectly through close friends. Now, the interesting part of this is that students experiencing cyberbullying are nearly 2 times more likely to attempt suicide. But we also know from studying this that students that engage in the bullying behavior also have a higher incidence of suicidal ideation, depression, and anxiety. So victims of cyberbullying were twice as likely to attempt suicide or engage in self-harming behaviors. Victims of cyberbullying, as well as the perpetrators, are at a higher risk of experiencing suicidal thoughts and behaviors. And the study also found a strong link between being a cyber victim and becoming a perpetrator. So the cycle perpetuates itself. If I'm bullied, I'm also going to turn around and bully others. And I think, a lot of that happens because kids are trying to get the spotlights off themselves in these cyberbullying behaviors. And the way to do that is to pick on somebody else, make a negative comment about their post, or make fun of that post covertly between friends, and then post it. The other thing that we see a lot there's been a lot of attention around is sexual harassment, and young men and women who are in romantic relationships that are pressured to post compromising images of themselves. And a lot of times that can be done over Snapchat, where they think that image is going to disappear. Well, it doesn't. Somebody screenshots it, recycles the image through the entire student body, and all of a sudden we have someone who's been very traumatized and sexually harassed. Hospital psych admissions data shows that we're seeing the number of children and teens expressing suicide or suicidal ideation doubled between 2008 and 2015, and unfortunately we do not see this trend slowing. And during COVID, I think we're going to, when we look back at this data historically, we're going to see a stark increase. At Children's Hospital Colorado, we've seen a 39% increase in behavioral health patients just from August to September, and we're seeing that trend upward continually into the fall. We can't necessarily say what parts of that are due to social media or cyberbullying, but I think there's probably a positive correlation. Bullying differences between male and females. Girls are very social media focused, and they oftentimes capitalize on that fear of missing out that happens, and they will bully through exclusion. Boys are very much more focused on physical means historically, but we're seeing a lot more of that transfer over to gaming and those chat applications that happen. And I've highlighted Fortnite in this case, because if you've ever played Fortnite as a parent and got completely conquered by your 8 or 12-year-old child, you'll understand that being really good at that game and then being able to rub it in somebody's face can be a form of bullying. Why is bullying so prevalent today? Well, I think we're seeing it become prevalent in our culture. It's a learned behavior from family systems, parents, peers, and also media. And I think we've seen a stark contrast in what is allowable in our media than even was 4 to 6 years ago. We fail a lot of times to recognize that insecurity is a part of our social emotional development on a journey to individuation, and recognizing that part of child and adolescent development is that insecurity, and we don't teach children that, and we also don't teach children social emotional intelligence in a way that's necessarily constructive, because it's a very difficult thing to teach. Insecurities manifest in different forms with children and teenagers. Some are self-conscious, some develop anxiety, some develop anger and lashing out, and some develop a different identity or dangerous behaviors. And the other thing about bullying is that the ability to bully anonymously has never really existed before in history, and that's what technology and social media has really allowed us to do. And it also allows us to never have to face the consequences of bullying a peer. So if I make a fake Instagram account, a Finstagram account, and I go on and bully a peer from school, nobody's going to know it's me unless I let the cat out of the bag. And COVID has again created that captive audience where kids are engaged in that addictive cycle of looking at their screens all day, checking for likes, checking for content, wanting to know what's going on with their friends and peers, and they just don't get a break from it. So why don't parents monitor teen social media use? This is a question that I've asked a lot in my work as a therapist, but also in my work as just seeing parents and families in crisis. And a lot of parents will say to me, they feel like it's a violation of their child's privacy and trust. I get that. They feel like it's reading their child's diary. They feel like in doing that or monitoring that, they're removing accountability from the teens and navigating those difficult situations. Sometimes they say, I don't want to know. I don't want to know what my kid's engaged in. I don't want to know the first time they've done this. I don't want to know the first time they've done that. And I don't want to know what their bad behavior might look like that I'm not privy to. It doesn't matter. To get around that, teens will often create secret accounts. And most of the teenagers that I worked with therapeutically would tell me about 3 or 4 accounts that they had. And one account was their best version of themselves, and the other account they'd engage in as their Finstagram account to put more racy content out there. That would a lot of times be the reason that their social identity was compromised, or somebody used that material to compromise them. A lot of times parents just don't understand how to use parental controls and things and manage a family account on their Android or Apple devices and place those restrictions on screen times. And the other reason for this, parents are bad about it themselves. Parents, a lot of times, I will admit myself, I've pulled out my phone at dinner to answer a call or look at a text message, and looking at it while driving, that sends a message to your child or teenager that it's okay to do. Even if you're saying something different, they're going to do as you do, not as you say. 95% of teens have a smartphone, and there are a lot of options out there for parental control apps. This slide is outdated. There are so many better built into the operating systems ways that you can monitor screen time, and all it takes is a quick Google or YouTube search to learn how to set those screen time limitations on your children and family. And you can also set content, so you can limit adult websites. You can limit particular websites that you do not want your children accessing. That can be very effective. There are particular apps that you can set custom internet schedules so that the actual ability to access the internet on their phone shuts down at a particular time. You can see their screen usage, but better yet, I think it's great to involve your child and teenager in the process of helping them come up with their plan and what is the plan that your family follows, so that every night at 9 p.m. everybody turns into their phones and they don't get them until the next morning, so we're not impairing sleep and we're not causing that anxiety and blue light exposure that impacts sleep. Engage your kids in this process of what it looks like to set limits and boundaries. And if you explain to them the addictive tendencies of this technology, they will respond with wanting to set those boundaries on themselves. There are also a lot of safe driving apps to protect your teenager in the car. And there's, Apple Drive Time. I'm sure there's something for Android out there, but those all these different things that you could just do a search in the App Store, or even through your provider like AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon, that will shut down the phone's ability to interact via text when a kiddo is driving. This is what we talked about: engaging your family and drafting the rules for the family. Talk about being a good digital citizen and validate their reality to be connected, but help them understand that everything they put out there is out there forever. I think a lot of teens have the misconception that if they put out a particular photo of themselves on Instagram or on Snapchat, that magically it disappears when they delete it. That is not the case. There's always a digital record of that on servers, and you never know when a search engine is going to be able to pull that up with their algorithms, especially as those algorithms get more intelligent as they're being controlled by AI. Some screen time tips. Don't make screens the reward or the consequence. This is something that I personally, as a parent, have a very difficult time with. It's easy to say, we're not doing our homework, we're not buckled down during this COVID time on our homework at home, so you're going to lose your screen time at night. That seems like a linear consequence. However, we know just human nature. You're taking something away, you are making it more desirable, and you're causing the child to overvalue that thing. So you're placing that attention on that addiction, where they're going to further sneak that out. And then you see kids sneaking their devices, they're keeping them in their rooms, they're hiding them, they're not wanting to give them up, and that's that cycle of addiction with this. Encourage other activities and model doing them. When I say model doing with them, do with. Don't say, hey, go do a craft, go play a sport. I used to do that. No, actually do it with them. Get outside, go do a family activity, go do a hike, play catch, get a new lawn game, whatever it may be. Doing crafts with your kids, cooking with your kids. It's surprising during this time of being locked down and isolated as families, what kids will engage in if you pique their interest and just say, hey, I bet you don't want to do this with me. I'm gonna bake something. Do you want to give it a try? And a lot of times kids are responsive to that. They're bored, and they're not getting as much of that fun from screen times as they did a long time ago, because they're on it all the time, but they're still getting that addictive cycle. So do have those conversations and offer things to do with them. Be prepared for difficult conversations when your kids stumble onto inappropriate content. This is going to happen. like I said, kids will go down the vortex and they'll find the end of the internet with inappropriate content, especially if you don't have those screen time blockers on there. And so if you don't answer those questions, they'll do additional searching to find out what's going on, and all of a sudden they're in a black hole of inappropriate content. So be ready to have those conversations if they discover inappropriate content. And this might be counterintuitive, but if your children are going to be on their screens and they're constantly texting, try encouraging them to do face-to-face interaction, giving them the time and place to FaceTime with their groups of friends, or even, you know, socialize, game, whatever they need to do. It's face-to-face, and when it is face-to-face, even if it's over the screen, they're able to see that person's emotional response. They're not guessing like they would be in a text message, and that helps to cultivate that empathy and that social emotional intelligence that we're really trying to cultivate. Sorry, technical difficulties here. Advancing. You know what? We did get to the end of the presentation, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll open it up for questions.
So please feel free to place your questions in the chat box. The first question is, what is the real definition of social media? Because my son says he doesn't use it, but I see YouTube up at the top and he definitely uses that a lot. Thank you.
That's a great question. And I think specifically with YouTube, your son's making a very intelligent argument, because he might be saying he is, you know, watching. One of the things I see a lot is kids will watch real-time gaming, or not real-time, but they'll watch somebody play through a game, a video game they're interested in order to be able to get tips and tricks of how to make it through the difficult levels of that game. They'll watch product videos, and those seem like they're just watching content. But if you scroll down, then we've got comments, and you've got shareability, and you've got shareability across a lot of different applications. And I think that is the very definition of social media, is we're able to use these things to engage interest, share across multiple platforms. And if your child is truly on there and they're absolutely interested in geology, and they're just watching videos about you know, aquamarine on Mount Chavano and the Collegiate Peaks, that's one thing. But I think that kids are very clever about how they pivot between different social media platforms, and they still do have that addictive tendency. So having that conversation with your son about why they're engaging in this, what is the part of social media that they like a lot. The other thing that I will point out is I see kids respond, particularly with rewatching shows, which a lot of times are on YouTube. They'll watch the same show over and over. And I started seeing this behavior about 2014, 2015. And shows like The Office, Seinfeld, a lot of those syndicated shows were put up on YouTube. They can watch the episodes over and over and over again. You're going, why would you be doing this? And what I learned after talking with enough teenagers was that it was a form of comfort. And when they were really stressed out, being able to settle in on YouTube with a show that was familiar to them and something that they'd seen umpteen times before was a way to just kind of relax. I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I think we've all done that at different times. But really having this conversation with your child about the content, what are they watching, why are they watching it, is important.
Could you address the documentary that you spoke of? Several people are asking about that.
Yes, so The Social Dilemma is a documentary. It was produced by Netflix, but more importantly, it was created by the coding engineers and social scientists who created Facebook, who created Twitter, who worked, for those big companies, and figured out how to prey on our addictive tendencies. And so they use social science and they use operant conditioning that's been out there forever in psychology to really understand what keeps us coming back, the same way that advertising has been trying to keep us engaged forever. Well, we know advertising moves a little bit too slow now. Now we have social media. And so they've figured out that if they can maintain our attention and addict us, that we will keep watching, and then they can earn advertising dollars. So I don't know about you, but I've seen every social media platform that I engage in get more and more advertising focused the longer they're around, to the point that it's now absolutely annoying to be on, and it's encouraged me to take a break every once in a while. But I think these individuals that created these algorithms, and we all know what mathematical algorithms are studying. For instance, if I'm scrolling through Instagram, how long I'm stopping on a particular post or advertisement, they're going to show me more of those particular posts or advertisements. This is the same reason why you might have 500 friends on Facebook, but you see the same 43 people's posts all the time. It's just too much content for them to push to their servers. So what do? They use the algorithms to cater to you and curate a feed for you. And then now they don't need these algorithms anymore, because AI, which we think is the future, no, I'm sorry, it's already here, has figured out how to make even better algorithms. So now the servers are running things. These coders don't even get involved anymore. The only thing they're involved with is searching for inappropriate, and only until recently, inaccurate or fake news content. So AI is in charge. They're going to be showing you what you want to see. It's going to be engaging us in a more addictive cycle, and they're going to be engaging your kids in a more addictive cycle. So what I like about the documentary is it has real life dramatic acting that shows, for instance, a tween age female who literally cannot put down her phone and goes into an almost anxious withdrawal when she's not able to see it. I hope that answers your question.
Next question, Tom, is are there any parental controls for YouTube?
So there's YouTube Kids, and that is again, more curated content for YouTube, and I would recommend that, especially if you have kids that are probably below their high school age years, or if you have kids that are lacking in the maturity, that they're going to be going on YouTube and looking for inappropriate content. Of course, regular YouTube does have filters that try to block out inappropriate content, but I don't think they're good enough. I still think a lot of really mature material makes its way onto YouTube. But I would recommend using YouTube Kids. I've used it personally with my kids, and they're still able to see what they want. Of course, they're not excited that they're not able to see the YouTube app and that it's blocked, but it's still entertaining for them.
Next question is, at what point do you identify that your child is considered addicted to electronics? For example, gaming, YouTube, etc.
Well, just like we gauge any addiction, you have to look at what happens when that form of media entertainment is taken away. Do they have mood lability, mood variations, ups and downs? Do they become anxious? Do they get angry? Which is a very common way of saying, hey, it's time to get off of your Xbox, it's dinner time. If you have a kid that's melting down, that's probably a good indication that it's time to have that conversation with them. Additionally, I recommend to families to do social media washes, or even device washes, where they say, hey, if you can make it through this weekend without picking up your cell phone or without going on social media, we're going to delete all of our apps, then you can earn, a reward, a form of allowance. You can earn $10, you can earn $20. You can earn something a privilege that you've wanted. And if your child can't get through a very short window of time, or you yourself can't get through that window of time, you are likely addicted to it. And I think that in the Social Dilemma documentary, even the people that are creating it are identifying that they might not be addicted to the thing that they created, like Instagram or Facebook, what they might be addicted to is their email, and they can't stop checking it. And I think that a lot of our modern day work and also our work from home makes us kind of a slave for that next update, that next email, that next thing, which is very similar to a like button. So I think we all need to take a hard look at ourselves and our behaviors and really lower our threshold for what we think addiction might be, because this is not drug addiction, this is not alcohol addiction, this is not nicotine addiction. This is something that we're much more susceptible to.
We have two questions around those screen time apps. One is, will you please go through the differences between the screen time apps? And the other is just asking if you could go back to the slide with examples of apps to supervise social media.
So when I made this slide deck back in early 2020, I didn't realize that some of that information, because apps and technology move so quickly, that a lot of them were kind of obsolete. And what I realized is that so many of the operating systems that we use with Android and Apple, and they have things like family sharing, and you have something in particular, what I'm familiar with, and I'm in no means an expert, is you've got your screen time app. And in this screen time app, if you're able to set up a family plan, you're able to say content and privacy restrictions, and you're able to block inappropriate content. And that can extend to your whole family. But again, I'm not an expert at this. I would encourage you to do a little bit of research online. That's how I found that out. But also, you can go to the App Store and you can search up things like content blockers or screen time apps, and they can show you different versions of that. I think better and better family sharing screen time apps are coming out all the time. I like Apple's. It also pings me anytime that my children want to download an app, and I'm able to approve or deny that. And then I get the whining if I decline. So it's important to do that. I think that it also gives us an opportunity to have that difficult conversation with our kids in real time, rather than waiting until something bad happens. And then I think I answered both those questions, but I didn't give specifics because I'm in no means an expert. But please do some research. I've had both Apple and Android devices in the last several years, and they are both built into the operating systems.
Can you discuss more the intersection between online gaming and social media and the addictive nature of e-gaming?
Yes, so I will do my best with that. What I've noticed and again, I'm a complete newbie when it comes to gaming, but I do try to watch and I do try to ask questions about, what my kids and their friends are playing and what are the different features of the games. And as time has progressed and new versions of these games have come out, they all seem to have a social interaction aspect to them. And all the gameplay, instead of what's now called co-op play, where I'm going to invite my buddy over and we're going to sit on the couch and each play Mario Kart together. I'm dating myself. But now it's all online. So we don't need to get together. We don't need to see each other. We can just put our big headphones on and disappear into the internet. And all these games have either a chat function or they're able to just talk back and forth. And the other thing is you can invite people to your private game, but you can also be invited to complete strangers games. And I think the intersection of where this can go wrong is you have complete strangers, or a lot of times adults that might have nefarious intent, with the ability to access and see that, hey, your child is online playing Fortnite right now, and they're going to send them a private message. And so I think that can open them up to victimization. And all the other thing that I find fascinating is oftentimes kids aren't using one medium. So while they're playing a game, they might be texting over iMessages, or even using the app like Discord, which is a very anonymous feeling texting app, and I really think has a lot of cyberbullying potential when I look at it. They're not using one thing, they're using multiple ways of communication, and that can open them up for cyberbullying, that can open them up for having their information compromised. or conversations with adults that are inappropriate, or being, asked questions, asked to do particular things, where do they live, things like that. So educating your kids about that, educating your kids that no, this is not your buddy and it's not their fake username. This may very well likely be, a 44-year-old in their parents' basement that is does not have good intent, for lack of a better way of explaining it.
So another question that's along the similar lines is, I know of a child who seems truly addicted to a game. Whenever things go wrong at school, he actually cries about how much he wants to play the online game. How should the parents wean him from this?
I would probably recommend slowly. So if you're seeing that the child's having a bad day at school and then they're looking for solace in something they have mastery in. So a game can be a source of mastery in the same way that a child prodigy at the piano can have mastery, or a child can have mastery over math or football or anything else. And so we don't want to discount that and say, no, absolutely no, you're not having this game, because we need to transfer that feeling of control and mastery to something else. So usually when I see kids that are highly addicted to a game, it's because they feel a sense of control and they feel competent in it. And so kids that are playing hundreds of hours of Fortnite feel very good about it because they can get in a social situation virtually and be the best at it. And they don't want to give that up. And so how do you distract them and how do you push them towards other interests? Because the best way to create that identity formation and self-confidence is to take whatever they're interested in, hopefully outside of video games, and encourage it. And that doesn't matter if it's something that you as an adult are not interested in. It can be something you're not even thinking about. It can be a musical style you hate that they are very interested in. It can be skateboarding. It can be alternative to a traditional activity. It can be acting. It can be theater. It can be stand-up comedy. It can be anything that that child is interested in. You want to encourage that at the time, because that's going to increase self-confidence and increase identity formation. I think kids are drawn to video games because they're addictive and because they're able to create that mastery very quickly. The other thing I will say about the new video games that I didn't realize until watching my kids and their friends play is that they're very drawn out, and they have these intense storylines behind them that are engaging. They're almost cinematic, and the writing is engaging. And so these kids are getting sucked into this whole other world that, especially during COVID, seems probably a lot more interested and magical than sitting at home and waiting for your parents to cut you off for dinner time.
Thank you, Tom. Next question. If screens can't be used as rewards or punishment, what are other options?
Oof, that's a great question. And I struggle with that recommendation. And that recommendation came from a scientific journal about how do you, what is the best way to wean addicted kids from their devices. And I think that if you have to think about, in a technology-less world, what would be a reward for your child? What is something that they used to enjoy doing? And a lot of times I think especially as we get surly or sullen adolescents that don't want to be around us and are continually drawn to their friends, we think they don't want to be around us. And I think a lot of times that's incorrect thinking, and we have to find ways to re-engage them with an activity that they would think would be fun or a privilege they previously didn't have. And I think if we think about it that way, they're going to be more apt to that healthy risk-taking and identity formation rather than being averse to any of that risk-taking, which is what social media causes them to do. So I know that wasn't a direct answer, but really be creative and ask them, if you didn't have this, if the internet didn't exist, what drives you? What motivates you? What do you like outside of this? And that kind of puts kids on their heels a little bit. And I think first you're going to get, this is the only thing I like, but encourage them, pressure them to think about it a little bit. And I think you'll get other answers.
Next question. Can you tell us more about how social media reduces the ability to take risk?
Yes. So if you think about it, if you were indeed a an 8th grader. I'd say 8th grade is the cruelest year, especially for young women, because I think there's just that, there's the intersection of development and social cruelty and bullying and cyberbullying that seems to happen worse at that age. But let's say you're trying to put a version of yourself out there on a platform like Instagram. You're automatically opening yourself up for criticism. If I put a picture up of myself, if you're a 13-year-old, of being on vacation or playing a sport or doing something you enjoy, you're automatically opening yourself up for negative feedback and comments. So what's the response to that? Don't put it out there at all. Or put it out there and live that life, but then be risk averse in other ways. So what we see is this risk averse is generalizing itself to other activities. And the one that really hit me hard as a therapist was all of a sudden I'd be talking to 17 and 18-year-olds about getting their driver's permit. And the parents would be coming in saying, I've been encouraging them to do this since they're 15 and they have not wanted to. And that just blew my mind, because I think, in former generations, we were chomping at the bit to get our permit and we couldn't wait to ruin our parents' car. And now they're just not doing that. Other behaviors, not wanting to get a job is when I saw a lot. Not wanting to go to college and live on campus, wanting to be closer in for their education. Nothing wrong with that, but I think it can frustrate parents when you're going, my child's not developing those skills to live alone. My child's not developing those real life skills to be on their own and wanting to take on those life skills and still trying to want to live under the protective veil of home. And so that has longer term consequences with social emotional development and, for lack of a better term, failure to launch adults that don't want to take on the expected adult activities of furthering your education, getting a job, and being independent.
How do you balance the risk of ostracizing your child for not being on social media when all of his or her friends are doing it?
Yes, absolutely. There's a couple things that I like to point out to kids, and if you haven't witnessed this, you can't witness it right now because it's COVID times, but go into your child's school, if they're middle school or high school, and watch what happens during free times. So in the hall and passing, after lunch, any of those times that they might be just milling about. And you'll see two things. You'll see everybody staring at their phones and trying to avoid eye contact. And you'll see everybody thinking that everyone is looking at them, which is kind of hilarious because everybody's looking at their phones. And so this isn't the social milling about that we saw 20 years ago, before 85% of kids, 11 and up, had smartphones. The reason I point that out is because kids don't want to be ostracized, and they don't want to be missing out on the group of people that are sitting in the bleachers during indoor recess staring at their phones. It's quite hilarious. And what I've found is when you point this out to kids that nobody is actually socializing, they're all just looking at their phones. They're like, yeah, you're kind of right. I mean, that is what happens. And I just feel like I'm left out of that activity because they're on the same apps, socializing to a sense in that way, or going through each other's feeds and looking at things. But it's not developing these kids social emotionally. It's not developing empathy. It's not developing their ability to be assertive and look somebody in the eye and talk to them. And I get it, we're not going to get out of that right away, and we're not going to talk a sixth grader into wanting their first smartphone. But I think providing them with the education about how addictive this is, trying to develop that family plan for what this looks like, and also, one of the easiest ways to get kids to not want something a lot of times is not making it a big deal. And I think the more that we hold out as parents on providing some access to this, the more it becomes a bigger deal in their mind, and the more that they, worship that want, and the more that they get addicted to it when they do have it. And so it isn't a big deal. Everybody does have one right now. Kids are going to get these phones. That is normalized, and you just have to educate them about the negative aspects of it. And they get it. They understand it, and I think we don't give them enough credit for that.
Lots of good questions tonight. Next question, does research prove that most parents ignore their child's electronic use because, quote, it keeps them busy and out of your hair, unquote? Basically, do most parents use electronics as a babysitter? Is this common more in one generation over another?
I don't think there's enough research out there to say generationally or if most parents. I think that just like anything, the more something happens, the more it becomes a societal norm. And what I'm particularly concerned about with COVID is you have more and more parents working from home and they just don't have the ability to monitor. And so if you have a house full of kids and you're trying to be on a work meeting, you need them to be quiet. I totally get that. And with them going to look at their tablet and doing schoolwork or switching over to a social media app, that's still getting your needs met with being able to successfully work from home. So it's a fine line right now. And I empathize with any parent trying to work full time from home and also supervise their kids' school. That has to feel next to impossible and very frustrating. So I think two things. We're seeing it's going to be normalized more and more during COVID as those, now that we're using all these devices to actually do school, it's set a precedent to a certain extent. And will that carry over post-COVID whenever we get back out of this and go back to brick and mortar schooling? Will we see more of that electronic babysitting in restaurants and in just people being out and about? I don't know. I think the research that's going to come down the road is going to be fascinating, especially the effects on our mental health. And this technology is just moving too fast for traditional ways of data gathering and science to catch up with. So I think that we'll see different things as generations progress and younger generations have kids, and we get into generations that have never not had this technology at their side all the time, having kids. And also, what is it going to look like if you are a fan of future technologies? There's people called futurists that write for television shows, and their job is to basically predict what's going to be the next thing. And they predict that smartphones and tablets are done by 2025. So then we're into wearables and implantables. And Google Glass didn't do very good the first time around, but they're thinking it's going to do very well the next time around. So we might be saying goodbye to this hardware technology that we carry around with us, and we're going to be saying hello to being wired in all the time. That's a little bit scary.
So do you see any effects of attention span with respect to social media?
Yes, and that's across media in general. If you've noticed, for many of us that grew up, that are, I guess, over probably 40 and 50, remembering when television programs moved very slowly, movies had more of a deliberate plot, conversations, and all of those things. Everything moves faster now, and everything is competing to give us the most dopamine reward in the shortest amount of time to keep us addicted so that they can advertise more to us. That's the name of the game. Everything's moving faster. And so that's decreasing all of our attentions, decreasing our attention spans, and also decreasing our frustration tolerance. So when something doesn't work immediately, you see people, for lack of a better term, kind of lose their minds. And I think when internet goes down during COVID and people are isolated, especially, that is frustrating. But these media outlets have a very captive audience right now, and they are experimenting on us, and they're finding out what really is getting the most hits, and when is the right time to advertise to us, how short those advertisements should be, when we're able to skip those advertisements by pressing a button, but they're still getting their message across, and they're still being able to study when we pause on something or when we watch something for 2 seconds longer than we did before. That's all data, and they're able to aggregate that data and create data hygiene and then figure out how they're going to market us to us. So do I think it's creating pathology like ADHD? I don't know. I can't say for sure. It's too early to tell, but it's certainly decreasing all of our frustration tolerance and ability to tolerate waiting.
So a couple more questions that are similar is just a parent asking, is it better to not let kids do social media at all, or to let them use some under parental control? Along with the question is, what is a reasonable amount of screen time per day?
So I looked at a lot of different data out there for appropriate screen time. And when kids are under 4, basically the answer is 0 hours of screen time. And you know, the reason is those kids from the time they're infants and babies and developing things like object permanence, to learning how to read their family's faces and attachment and emotions, and you know, getting their needs met through expression emotions. Really, screen time does nothing but take away from that. But as you get up through the age groups, the you know, professional recommendations are changing, and I think they're changing more out of necessity, because the people that are the best at this and making these recommendations are realizing that people are going to have social media. So now it's just like, okay, we have to stem the tide of doing this all the time. So, you know, I think that monitoring, knowing what your child is looking at, and for kids under high school age, really trying to keep it to under 2 hours a day. God, I know that's difficult, but that's particular, that's not their school time, but that's particular with their social media time or their gaming time, or that time when they're unwinding during the day with that. Now, I would exclude activities like FaceTime calling and video calling, because that's socialization, and especially during COVID, they need that. I know that wasn't a specific answer to your question, but I think we're all in a pickle here, where if we completely restrict, we might be ostracizing our children and not teaching them how to be good stewards of electronic usage. And if we just do the free-for-all, we're, you know, creating that addictive tendency.
Great questions, everyone. Since we are in unusual times because of the pandemic, is it okay for now to allow them more time on the internet and gaming? They can chat with their friends like that, since they can't do much of that in person.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. Especially, you know, if they're able to video and see each other interacting. But we do need to have a little bit of leeway during this time. And you know, they're under stress. They're having to navigate what school looks like, and it's difficult. So I think we do need to have leeway. The important thing is, do you know what your child is looking at? Do you know what content they're viewing? And having those conversations, but also, you know, learning the technology so that they're not accessing something that's inappropriate, especially for the younger kiddos. I'll add one other thing to that. There is, you know, I think that a lot of times some parents do game, and some parents have used as an opportunity to spend time with their children, and identifying a particular game that both the child likes and both the parent likes. For me, I've really tried to learn Madden football. I'm horrible at it. My kid kills me, but it ends up being 45 minutes that we're laughing together as he sacks the quarterback every single time I get the ball. And that's been a lot of fun. So you can use it in constructive ways as well.
For sure, those connections, especially now, are so important. Next question is, do we address any of this in our schools? The addiction of social media, the lack of social and social media, etc. And I'll just share, as far as our district, we continue to teach digital citizenship at all levels of school, elementary through high school. And we certainly address social media concerns on an individual basis. So, and I don't know, Tom, if you have anything to add to that with your work with other schools and kids in our area?
I think the fact that we're having this chat right now shows a lot about what D20 in particular is trying to do to address this and educate parents. And you know, like I said earlier, every school district is required by law in the state to have a response to bullying, but that's very difficult to do. And it really does start with what examples we're setting in the home around bullying and being able to call that behavior out within our families, within our communities, with what kids are seeing and witnessing in the media. And that's really where things start. So I appreciate that everything that the schools are doing, but it's a whole community responsibility that extends to all of us.
I have a question. Would you recommend Common Sense Media and some of those resources for parents?
Yes, a lot of data that I get that is more up to date is from Common Sense Media. I think this is their focus right now, and we're not going to see the hard science follow. It's just can't keep up to date with using a valid and reliable scientific method in a longitudinal study. They can't do it quickly enough, and so we are going to need to use, for lack of a better term, a more hip shot science and best guesses about what social media is doing to our brain chemistry and our moods and our habits, and how it's shaping how we interact with one another in real time, and how AI is creating those algorithms to further shape our behavior to make money for these media companies. And it can be used for a lot of good. We've all experienced that, but we also just have to have those honest interactions with ourselves and with our children about, hey, I'm addicted to this. My screen time was up 25%, and I checked my phone 57 times today for a work email. That's not necessarily healthy. We all feel tethered to a certain extent, but be honest with your kids about your own shortcomings with it as well, because it's preying on us all.
Are there any other questions? These have all been great. We certainly want to give a huge thank you to Tom Caughlan. There are a lot of nice thank yous in the chat, Tom. We appreciate you being here tonight. Our next Parent Academy is Tuesday, December 8th. It is on anxiety and depression. How do we help ourselves and our children during this time? This will be presented by Academy District 20 mental health professionals, and we hope that you will attend. So before you leave, if you would just make sure that you click the link in the chat for the evaluation so we can get your feedback and continue to offer great quality presentations on relevant topics for you. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great night.
Thank you all.